For this scenario, we're going to talk about an urban anti-armor ambush. So basically, we know a mechanized enemy with armored vehicles, tanks, is moving in our direction. We're trying to slow them. We're not going into a full-on urban warfare scenario, the siege of Stalingrad, that type of thing. We're trying to cause them some damage. We're trying to slow their advance. So first off, we're going to go from the defender side, and then occasionally when a note comes up, I'll mention how the unit that's caught in the ambush could counter it. And then maybe some ideas on how the ambusher can counter that counter. The very first thing the defending force, the ones that are going to do the ambush, need to do is figure out which direction the enemy is coming from and what's their most likely avenue of approach. What roads are they most likely going to take or currently are taking that you can confirm coming in your direction? How long will it take them to get there? Once you get that info, figure out what do you have realistically. You know, how many anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs, do you have? How many anti-tank rockets do you have? Laws. How many IEDs can you scrape together? How many mines? How many machine guns? How many personnel? You get all that information and then you try to figure out, well, where would be the best location on this route for me to attack? My primary recommendation is, if you're going to hit the enemy, you're a guerrilla, try to do it out in the country, not in a city, so that you lessen the number of civilian casualties. Plain and simple. Now, if the enemy has multiple routes they can take to move through the area or to enter that city, try blocking some of them off. It could be by putting in burning obstacles. Multiple vehicle accidents, look like the vehicles ran together, and then set them on fire. Burn out some bridges, blow some bridges, whatever you're able to do. Down some trees, down some power lines, drop some wreckage and stuff across the road, piles of construction trash, big chunks of concrete, steel. Try to keep them from using that particular route. And then the main route you want them to take to come into your kill zone, you'll still put some stuff on there, but you're going to make that the easier obstacles to get past, to get through, so that it's not as obvious that you want them to travel that direction. If you got only one way that they can come in, one particular road, don't need to worry about that too much. Now, once you do that, you've decided you're going to put in your ambush inside a city. Decide where in the city the conditions are the best for you for conducting that ambush. You're going to want good fields of fire. You're going to want very close terrain where they're blocked in. Like here we have a narrow road, maybe 2-lane. It's easier to control your enemy on a 2-lane than it is on a 4-lane. You want things as tight as possible so that they can't maneuver around easily. And where they can maneuver around, you want to make sure that you're going to position weapons to counter that. Now we've chosen our spot. Now we're going to start setting up. First off, we're going to have a lookout, someone with a radio, a cell phone, binoculars. Someone who's going to be out front, well ahead of the ambush, who's going to give you warning that they're approaching. Send out that radio signal. Send out that cell phone communications. Set fire to a big pile of trash or something, like a pile of tires, because that'll give off a huge amount of smoke. Something. That'll be a good indication that, hey, the enemy's en route. They're passing checkpoint Alpha. and they're coming into the ambush area, they'll be there in approximately this amount of time, basically. Once you got your observation in, and that observation might have 1 or 2 people for security, maybe a fire team, who knows. They do not engage the enemy. They just allow the enemy to go past, do not be noticed, and then they slip out of the area once the ambush happens. Or once the ambush is complete, because maybe you want them to stay in position to give you warning in case reinforcements are on the way. You're going to want, at this point, your main body, you're going to want to spread them around. Try to get your people, especially your most casualty producing weapons, your belt feds, up into the higher levels of buildings, up onto roofs. Remember, you got to think of cover and concealment. So when you're looking at buildings, assess them. Will it work as a battle position? You may think of, well, I'll put them in the house because the enemy wouldn't think of us being inside this house because it's made out of wood. Well, guess what? That house made out of wood will not stop bullets pretty well, and it will burn, and burn very quickly. And there's a very high possibility your people would be trapped inside, burned alive. So you're trying to look primarily for masonry targets or masonry buildings. Buildings made out of poured concrete, out of brick, out of stone. Stuff that'll take some impact. You know, it doesn't have to be super solid, but, you know, enough that it'll take a few rounds. It's not going to fall apart as easily during the firefight. It'll hold together long enough that you can put your fire on, and then you can escape and evade or whatever, reposition yourself to your next location that you're going to fire from, whatever you have set up. You find those buildings, then decide what weapon needs to go in there. As much as possible, you want to sight your weapons. You have big fields of fire and long fields of fire. A machine gun placed up here on this building here will have a nice long beaten path for their rounds that they can shoot down. A machine gun placed over here has this nice wide area. Here they can engage. Machine gun placed here, well, still has this huge area here they can engage. If you put one over here, it's going to be kind of limited, but you still got up in front of these buildings, which, in case the enemy tries assaulting in there to take care of any people on top of up here, a machine gun over here, as long as his observation isn't too obscured by trees, any type of vegetation, he can provide fire right into the backs of these troops as they're trying to clear out these apartment buildings. You also want to think of your anti-tank weapons, and you need to consider what the weapon is. Most anti-tank weapons have a horrendous backblast on it. That's the pressure that comes out the back of the weapon. You fire that in too small of a space, what happens is that backblast is going to hit those walls, that material behind you, and it's going to get focused right back at you. I remember one video clip from the war in Syria, an ISIS RPG gunner, or RPG. This guy's inside a small room inside an apartment building with an RPG, and the room is way too small for the backblast for that RPG. He's at this window or this little hole in the wall. It's not very big. It's just big enough for him to get the rocket through there, get a little bit of observation. He's got the rocket facing through there, pulls the trigger, rocket goes out. Well, the backblast hits the concrete walls behind him, and he and the person taking the video, they get seriously messed up from that concussive force. It will cause massive internal injuries, rupturing organs, causing massive concussion injuries. Take that into consideration. Your heavier anti-tank weapons, you're going to want to locate them a little bit farther away from the ambush site so that they get a little bit extra time, that once they fire off their 1 or 2 rounds, whatever they're supposed to, that they can get out of there and head back to the rally point for when the battle is complete. So they fire off their rounds, they escape and evade while other people provide fire. But same thing here. We have an anti-tank weapon here. We'll say this is an anti-tank missile. Let's say it's a Javelin, or it could be an AT-13, whatever is available. Well, we have a nice long shot going down the column from this corner up here. So he can pick off basically any vehicle he wants to. Up here, maybe we got something a little bit closer range. It could be another Javelin. Maybe it's an NLAW. Or maybe it's a older type of anti-tank rocket. An AT-5 or something like that. Russian-made AT-5. He still has a nice wide kill area here, but he's not going to have as many targets. The other positions that you could have, maybe have them equipped with your light anti-tank weapons, your RPG-7s, you know, the disposable RPGs, the 18s, the 22s, the 26s, the US M72s, the M136, the AT-4 in US military service and NATO service. Have that stuff with your rifle teams and that stuff. They're a little bit closer in. But remember, there's also a minimum arming distance, just like there's a maximum distance. Have your stuff sighted in and figured out accordingly. So we got our major weapon systems in there. Now we look at how many people do we have left? What type of weapons do they have? So you want those additional troops to support those major casualty causing weapons. So maybe you only want 1 or 2 riflemen with that anti-tank gunner to provide security while he pulls back. Or maybe 1 will provide security while they're pulling out of position. 1 travels with them with his weapon at the ready in case you bump into enemy personnel as you're escaping the building, as you're pulling back. We got our people in position now for covering eventualities. We have anti-tank weapon up here, machine gun up here. We have squad automatic weapon, which we'll be concentrating down in here in case they get this far. And then we'll also have some type of charge or something set up that in case they blow through our kill zone down here, we can still disable them up here. We have some rifles and that stuff that may be spread out. And remember that I have these on top of the boxes for the model. These people could be spread out inside upper floors and that stuff also. On top of here, we have a machine gun who's sighting down the column here. We have some riflemen here who could engage any enemy troops that are traveling ahead of the column on this side of the roadway. They could toss some hand grenades over the top of the edge of the roof, cook them off if they're able to before they go off. Then they pop up and they go full auto, pouring their fires in. We have a machine gun up here. Like this guy's going this direction, he's going the same way this way. Anti-tank weapon here to hit him from the flank. And then we have riflemen next to him to provide security, but also assist with taking out any troops that decide to dismount to try to take these positions here or come into this area here. We figure out where the entrances and exits are. If we got enough people, we'll pull some people at other buildings behind it as security for those exits. So if the enemy dismounts, is able to get up here because of using smoke, the entrance is over here. These guys may not make it out in time, or they could get set up over here as an ambush to hit them as they're coming out. Well, maybe we'll have someone with a rifle up here who can engage them down here before these guys get there. And maybe we got a few other people here that could do the same thing. Up in here, we have a team that they would be sitting behind this wall. And it's really common overseas. Walls and fences that you're going to see around residential areas and that stuff, they're going to be made out of masonry. They're going to be made out of concrete block. They're going to be made out of brick. They're going to be made out of stone, whatever is available. It's really only in the US and Western Europe where sometimes you'll see these wooden fences and that stuff. Overseas, it's usually something really massive that'll give a bit of protection. So up in here, right where we want the ambush to get initiated, we decided we're going to start it right in here. We have a fire team down in here with one person up here pulling security, watching the next yard over and what's going on here. He will also signal these guys down here when to initiate. So when these enemy troops are right in front of this wall here, they'll toss hand grenades over the top. Hopefully cook them off, set them off here. Grenades go off over here, and that takes care of those infantry that are traveling in front of the armored column if they're doing the battle drill correctly. Now we have here disengagement start. These guys toss in grenades. We have some others that were back here behind this tank. They sweep through to try to flank, try to cut them off. Well, that's where your lookout up here switches over to their weapon and starts pouring in fire on them when they come out in the open, as soon as they come through that gate through there. Now you may notice up here on the intersection, in order to keep the enemy inside our kill zone here, we've blocked off the roadway with vehicles. By doing it like this, the point this way, if the enemy would try ramming their way through, they're going to push the vehicles back, pushing them together, jamming them together that much worse. The best way in this case is he would have to come in along the side, try to push the vehicle out of the way. Well, how do you counter that? You have one or two people hiding up around these vehicles with not just their weapon, but maybe some type of anti-tank weapon. RPG with the best rockets you got for close range. This other side here, same thing, comes through. He's going to really want to hit this vehicle the way it's angled right up along the wall to push it out of the way. If he hits it towards the front where he's going to have the best cover from up here, he's just going to jam it more into the building, causing more problems. If the best way for him to hit it is on the backside here to push it out of the way, but with him doing that, he leaves himself more open for the people on top that they could take him out. Could be with Molotovs, could be with RKG-3 anti-tank grenades. I did a video on those. It's over at BitChute. I did it a while ago. It's an anti-tank grenade, considered obsolete, but still being used on the battlefield, even in Ukraine right now, to very great effect. Point is, keep your enemy inside the kill zone as much as possible. So we get our people in position and we get them ready. We have our lookouts are set up. Communications are set up. We have comms checks with them, confirm that they can hear us and we can hear them. And we wait for the enemy to approach. Now, before we get set up, before the enemy gets there, we get the civilians out of the area. Don't be like a stupid-ass terrorist or a neo-Nazi sack of crap inside Ukraine and use the humans as human shields. Get the civilians out of the area. Pull them back. You know, if you can, take them out of the city, move them somewhere outside the city, place a guard on them so that they're protected, and you make sure that no one there gets on their phone and notifies the enemy that you're approaching. You don't know. There could be a fifth columnist in that city, in that group that you gathered up. Barring that, get them down in basements. And when they go down there, make sure they do not have a radio, they do not have a cell phone on them. If possible, get them out of the immediate area where the ambush is going to occur. Pull them back a ways, a block or two, and get them put in some type of shelter, some type of basement, somewhere where they'll be protected from any direct fires that are going on here, directly from the vehicles, directly from the ambushers, and any indirect fire that could be sent in by a call for fire from these guys that they need support. They may call in for an airstrike. They may call in for artillery. They may call in for mortars to help lay down suppressive fires on the ambushers so they can get out of the kill zone. Now, the enemy's moving up. They've dismounted some infantry traveling around the front of their column. They have some additional, which are back here behind the tanks. The ones that are traveling behind, they're the ones that are supposed to clear the sides where needed. The ambushers stay out of sight. No civilians are out. The enemy sees that no civilians are out. They may get antsy, they may get jumpy, they may get paranoid. So they know that they could potentially be moving through an ambush. And they're going to be waiting for that. Column comes up. The infantry end up into the kill zone here. Grenades from here, grenades from here. As soon as those grenades start going off, the very first one, that's when your anti-tank weapons open up. Take out that vehicle in the front. Take out a vehicle as far back as you can. Or multiple vehicles going back in the column. Trying to trap as many as possible inside the kill zone. Tactic typically is, vehicles will get out of it any way they can. This tank most likely would turn and try traveling this way to try to get out of the fires coming from up here. This guy here, he could do the same thing, or he may notice, hey, there's no outlet over here, which he hasn't noticed yet. So what he might do, he might ram the wall here and try cutting through the residential area. Well, if that happens, we now have a rear shot on his vehicle to this team up here or this team up here. You get the clues on that. We have infantry that peeled off because of fire coming up from over here, so they decided they're going to try taking care of some of the ambushers up here, maybe catch them coming out of the building, one or the other. So they dismount, they start moving in. When they start moving in, they get into here. Well, they'll get fire from here, they'll get fire from there. We had a team come through here, they're trying to hit the ambushers up here. That's when this guy opens up on them in there. Maybe he'll toss in a hand grenade and then he'll start pouring in fire. Remember, the first shots of an ambush is referred to as the mad minute. You're pumping in as many rounds into the target as you can. You're trying to take them out, suppress them, keep them in that kill zone where they can't move. Give your people greater chance of picking them off any way as possible. Now, you maybe notice this building over here. I didn't mention it yet. And you may be wondering, well, why don't I have a weapon on this building here to also get that nice long plunging fire? See why? You got to take into account when you set up your ambushes buildings that are protected, that are exempt from the battle. They're not lawful targets. They're doing this in Ukraine, and it's against international law, where the ambusher, the defender, is occupying some of these protected buildings, thinking, well, I'm protected in here, the enemy's not going to fire on it. And if they do fire on it, it's a war crime. No, it's actually a war crime that you went in there, tried to use it as protection. That you're using it as your barracks. You're using it as an ambush position. As soon as you do that, that area loses its protected status. And it's no longer a war crime for them to return fire on that building. So this building is a hospital. We did not occupy it. Try to keep the enemy inside the kill zone as long as possible. When you're setting up the ambush, think of you're the enemy. You know, how would you escape if you get hit from this direction or get hit from that direction? You see an IED go off here. Well, what am I going to do in response to that IED? You know, I see an anti-tank weapon go off from over here. How am I going to respond to that? How am I going to get out of the kill zone? How am I going to put fire on the enemy? Think like your enemy as you're setting up, and you get your ambush put in. It's not overly complicated. It just requires a lot of thinking. Look at what your capabilities are, what you have available to you, how many people you have, what's the capabilities of the enemy, how many are probably going to be in there, how many can you handle. The ones, and you got to take into account the ones that are caught outside the kill zone. How would they respond? And then you need to figure out ways to counter that. There could be another 2/3 or 3/4 of a column back behind this BMP here, my simulated BMP. How are they going to respond? Are they just going to turn around, pull back, pull security, assess the situation, and figure out what to do? Or are they going to start dismounting and trying to attack along the flanks to try to get these guys out? It pays off to learn your enemy's tactics, how they do things. It really helps out when you're trying to figure out how an enemy will respond. Just because an enemy or you have something written in doctrine doesn't mean that's the exact way that they're going to respond to it. They may have a different battle drill that works better. And you need to take that into account. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.